Americans buy over $2.8 billion worth of chocolate every year, but for centuries, nobody ate it. The Aztecs drank it cold, mixed with chili peppers, bitter enough to make you wince. The solid bar did not appear until 1847. Today, this factory turns raw cacao beans from West Africa into smooth, snappable bars, and the journey starts with a roast. The beans arrive in burlap sacks from the Ivory Coast, and they smell nothing like chocolate. Raw cacao is sharp, almost vinegary, with no hint of sweetness. These are Forastero beans, the workhorse of the chocolate world, chosen for bold flavor and reliable yield. Some makers prefer the gentle Criollo bean, but Criollo trees produce 1/10 as much and cost 3 times more. Fine for a boutique, not for a factory filling trucks. A tip for the grocery aisle: chocolate labeled single origin, all beans from one region, tends to taste more distinctive than blends sourced from multiple countries. The beans tumble into a rotating drum roaster at 250 degrees Fahrenheit, and this is where that vinegary raw smell finally becomes chocolate. Roasting triggers a chain reaction called the Maillard reaction, the same chemistry that browns a steak or gives toast its aroma. 30 minutes in the drum and the beans come out dark, fragrant, and completely transformed. This factory roasts 8 tons every day, enough for 160,000 finished bars. From the roaster, the hot beans pass through a winnower that cracks each one open and blasts away the papery husks with jets of air. Out come cacao nibs, small, dark, crunchy fragments packed with concentrated flavor. Now the nibs enter a grinding mill, and here is where things get surprising. Heavy steel rollers crush the nibs, and the friction alone generates enough heat to melt the fat locked inside. Cacao butter, dry, crumbly fragments flow out the other side as a thick, warm liquid called chocolate liquor. No alcohol. The name comes from an old word for liquid. A hydraulic press separates this liquor into 2 parts: pale yellow cacao butter and dark cacao powder. The factory recombines them in controlled proportions, adding sugar and a touch of soy lecithin to bind everything together. From there, the blend enters a conching machine, a heated trough with granite rollers that knead the chocolate non-stop for 72 hours, 3 full days. The rollers grind particles below 20 microns, far too small for the tongue to detect as grit, while the heat drives off harsh acids that would otherwise taste sour. It is often the single biggest difference between a cheap bar and a good one: deep, glossy, and impossibly smooth. Now comes tempering, the trickiest step. A machine heats the chocolate to 131 degrees, cools it to 82, then raises it to exactly 90. This precise cycle forces cacao butter crystals into a formation called Form 5, the only structure that gives a bar its clean snap and glossy shine. Get the temperature wrong by just a few degrees, and the bar comes out dull, soft, and coated in chalky white bloom. The tempered chocolate flows into polycarbonate molds on a vibrating conveyor. The vibration is not decoration. It shakes out trapped air bubbles that would leave holes in the finished bar. The filled molds glide through a cooling tunnel at 50 degrees for 20 minutes. Each bar contracts just enough to pop cleanly from the mold. A flipper inverts them, and the solid bars drop onto a padded belt. Then an infrared sensor scans every bar. If one cooled too fast, the crystal structure inside has not set properly, and it will bloom on the shelf weeks later. Anything above 64 degrees gets diverted. Inspectors here train for 6 weeks before they are clear to certify a single production run. The bars reach the wrapping station, where machines fold foil and paper around each one at 300 per minute. The foil is not just for branding. It blocks ultraviolet light, which would break down the cacao butter and turn the chocolate rancid within weeks, the kind of detail you never think about until you know. If any wrapper fails to seal, a sensor catches the gap and diverts the bar before it reaches the carton. A metal detector provides the final safety check, running non-stop, scanning every bar on the line. A single missed fragment would trigger a full batch recall. But cacao's journey does not end as a chocolate bar. The same bean also gave rise to chipped cookies, a recipe born entirely by accident, when a baker expected the chocolate to melt, but it never did. In 1930, innkeeper Ruth Wakefield ran out of baker's chocolate and broke a semi-sweet bar into the dough instead, expecting it to melt.
It did not. The chips softened into warm pockets, and the chocolate chip cookie was born by accident. At this factory, every batch starts in a mixer the size of a small car. White sugar and brown sugar go in first, followed by butter. The paddles blend until the butter turns creamy and the sugars dissolve. Brown sugar plays a bigger role than most people think. It contains molasses, and that moisture is what keeps the cookie chewy instead of crunchy. A factory making crisp cookies would skip brown sugar entirely. This company uses more of it because their customers prefer a softer bite. Next comes semi-sweet chocolate chips. Ground to a particle size that holds shape in the oven rather than melting flat. If the chips were any finer, they would vanish into the dough. Flour goes in, followed by baking soda for lift, salt for balance, and whole eggs beaten with vanilla extract sourced from Madagascar. The mixer runs for about 5 minutes. The company guards exact proportions closely, but the approach mirrors a home recipe multiplied by several thousand. This factory produces over 80,000 pounds of cookie dough every day, enough for roughly 1.5 million cookies before the shift ends. The finished dough is dense, fragrant, and slightly sticky. It moves to a machine called the former, where rotating drums push it through round dies to produce rows of 41-gram portions. The rounds drop onto parchment-lined trays and slide into a convection oven at 300 degrees. Turntables inside rotate each tray so every cookie bakes evenly. Here is the transformation worth watching. The rounds into the oven nearly 4 centimeters tall and 4 centimeters wide. 7 minutes later, they have flattened and doubled in diameter. The baking soda has done its work, releasing carbon dioxide gas that created thousands of tiny air pockets throughout the dough. Those pockets are what give each cookie its light, tender crumb. And they are also why a cookie feels so different from a cracker, even though both start as flour and fat. From the oven, the cookies slide onto a wire cooling conveyor, warm, golden, and lightly cracked on the surface. A quality tester pulls samples from each batch, checking diameter, height, and chip count. If visible chips fall below a minimum, the dough was undermixed and the batch is flagged. Distribution matters too. A cookie with all its chocolate clustered on one side fails inspection. For retail, approved cookies pass through a flow wrap machine that seals them in printed film, then groups them into cartons. For the food service market, hotels, restaurants, school cafeterias, the factory takes a completely different route. Dough rounds are flash frozen in a liquid nitrogen tunnel at -320 degrees Fahrenheit. The rounds solidify in about 5 minutes and ship out frozen so the customer can bake them fresh on site. Nitrogen freezing is 10 times faster than a conventional freezer. That speed prevents large ice crystals from forming inside the dough, which would change the texture after baking. Frozen cookie dough baked from a nitrogen tunnel tastes closer to fresh than any other preservation method. Each sealed bag of frozen dough rounds is flushed with nitrogen gas before closing, not to freeze, but to push out oxygen. Even a small pocket of air trapped inside would turn the butter rancid within weeks on a warehouse shelf. The same invisible gas that froze the dough now protects it. Every bag passes through a metal detector, and random samples from each shift go to a tasting panel that scores texture, flavor, and chip distribution against a reference standard. Any score below threshold sends the batch back for reprocessing. But while cookies use chocolate in solid pieces, the next product dissolves it into a liquid, and keeping it from sinking to the bottom required solving a problem that stumped dairy scientists for 2 centuries. Chocolate milk outsells every other flavored milk in America by 4 to 1. The drink dates to the 1680s, when an Irish botanist in Jamaica watched locals stir cacao into milk. Before modern machines, it had to be stirred constantly. Stop stirring, and the cocoa sinks straight to the bottom. At this dairy plant, the solution starts with raw milk from farms within 200 miles. The milk arrives in refrigerated tankers and flows into silos at 38 degrees. Each load is tested for antibiotics, bacteria, and butterfat before a single gallon is accepted. The plant uses whole milk with at least 3.25% fat because fat is what carries flavor. Skim milk would need nearly twice as much cocoa and sugar to deliver the same chocolate punch, raising both cost and calories. Full fat wins that trade-off. A quick label tip:
Whole milk on a chocolate milk carton generally means a richer, smoother taste than reduced fat, even though both contain cocoa. The milk flows through a pasteurizer, a stack of thin steel plates, heating to 161 degrees for exactly 15 seconds, long enough to kill bacteria without cooking the flavor out. From there, it enters the blending tank. First comes Dutch processed cocoa, treated with an alkaline wash that makes it darker, less acidic, and easier to dissolve than the natural kind. Sugar goes in next. Then comes the ingredient that solves the sinking problem, carrageenan, a thickener extracted from red seaweed. Carrageenan grabs cocoa particles and holds them suspended throughout the liquid. Without it, every glass would end with brown sludge at the bottom. One ingredient, and the problem disappears. Now the step that makes it permanent, homogenization. The blended milk is forced through a narrow valve at 2,500 pounds per square inch, enough pressure to shatter each fat globule into roughly 10,000 smaller droplets, far too tiny to float to the surface as cream.
Before homogenization, the fat would separate within hours. After, it stays mixed for weeks. The factory pushes 15,000 gallons through the homogenizer every hour, enough to fill 120,000 single-serve cartons before noon. Rich, dark, and perfectly uniform. From the homogenizer, the milk passes through a second pasteurizer for a final safety treatment, then into aseptic holding tanks. The filling room runs at 200 cartons per minute. Gable-top cartons advance on a conveyor, and a rotary filler injects a measured dose into each one. Heated jaws fuse the coated paperboard shut. Date codes are laser printed on the side. The sealed cartons pass through a metal detector, and then a check weigher that catches anything even half an ounce off target. One carton too light means an underfill. One too heavy could signal a machine calibration drift. Both get diverted. Quality technicians pull random cartons every 20 minutes for a sensory panel. Color, aroma, consistency, and taste, all judged against a reference sample. Technicians here train for 4 months before running evaluations solo. Each carton carries a code traceable back to the specific tanker truck, the specific farm, and the exact hour the milk was collected. If a customer calls with a complaint, the factory can reconstruct the entire journey in minutes.
True Move. It's nutritious. It's made with low-fat milk with no artificial growth hormones or high-fructose corn syrup. Just the chocolatey taste kids love.
Robotic arms case the approved cartons in groups of 12. The cases are sealed, palletized, and moved to a cold room held at exactly 36 degrees, not frozen, because freezing would rupture fat globules and undo the homogenization.
The milk stays fresh for up to 18 days, as long as the cold chain never breaks. The factory tests stored samples daily. A single broken link, one truck too warm, one store cooler set wrong, and bacteria levels spike. If any stored sample drifts outside range, every carton from that batch is pulled before it reaches a shelf. The milk stays fresh for up to 18 days. But while chocolate milk stays liquid from start to finish, the next product freezes cream and chocolate together, and the window between a warm coating and a solid shell is exactly 4 seconds. Every 3 seconds, a new chocolate ice cream bar rolls off this production line, over 28,000 a day. The idea dates to 1920, when a lemonade vendor in Iowa left a cup with a stirring stick outside on a winter night. The liquid froze around the stick, and a new kind of dessert was born. This factory sources its cream from Wisconsin, where cold winters produce milk with especially high butterfat. Fresh cream arrives by tanker. The base blend is cream, skim milk powder, sugar, corn syrup, and a stabilizer mix of guar gum and carabine gum. Without stabilizers, ice crystals would grow large during storage, and the texture would turn coarse and grainy within days. This factory uses guar gum instead of the cheaper cellulose gum because guar produces a creamier mouthfeel, a difference most people notice on the tongue even without knowing why. For frozen desserts, the stabilizer choice is often what separates premium from budget. The base passes through a pasteurizer at 175 degrees, then a homogenizer at 2,000 pounds per square inch. Dutch processed cocoa and vanilla extract are folded in.
Now comes a step that looks like nothing is happening. The mixture sits in an aging tank at 40 degrees for 4 full hours. But inside the tank, fat molecules are slowly crystallizing, and those tiny crystals are essential. They act like hooks that grab onto air in the next stage. Skip the aging, and the finished bar comes out dense and icy instead of light and creamy. Patience, even in a factory running at full speed. The aged mix enters a continuous freezer, a barrel with a spinning dasher blade that scrapes the walls as the cream freezes. The blade whips air into the mix as it solidifies, a process called overrun, increasing volume by 40%. Without this air, the bar would freeze into a block dense enough to chip a tooth. The soft cream exits at 22 degrees, cold enough to hold shape, soft enough to mold. An extrusion nozzle deposits rectangular portions onto a conveyor, moving at exactly 12 feet per minute. Sticks drop from a magazine, and a mechanical arm pushes one into each portion before the cream sets. Timing is tight. If the stick enters even a second late, it will not bond and will slide out when someone takes a bite. A camera photographs every bar and compares the stick angle to a template. Anything more than 3 degrees off center gets rejected. Deep brown, sharply cut, and perfectly aligned. The bars enter a hardening tunnel at -40 degrees and freeze solid in 8 minutes. Now comes the moment the whole line has been building toward. Each bar is lifted by its stick, dipped through a curtain of tempered chocolate at exactly 95 degrees, held for 2 seconds, and pulled out.
The warm coating hits the frozen surface and hardens into a crisp shell in under 4 seconds.
That 115-degree contrast between coating and cream is what makes it set almost on contact. A single coating tank holds 500 pounds of chocolate and gets refilled every 45 minutes. Coating technicians check the temperature 3 times an hour. A shift of just 2 degrees changes the shell thickness. Too warm, and it is paper thin.
Only technicians with 2 years on the line are cleared to touch the settings. A final blast of cold air locks the shell. Flow wrap machines seal each bar in foil at 180 per minute. The wrapper is creased in a specific pattern designed to peel open cleanly, because a wrapper that tears into pieces leaves foil on the chocolate, and nobody wants to bite into that. A metal detector and check weigher reject anything outside a 2-gram window. Robotic arms load approved bars into cartons of 12, seal them, and move them into a -10-degree freezer. From liquid cream to coated wrapped bar, the entire journey has taken less than 35 minutes. Next time you peel back the foil on a chocolate ice cream bar, remember, that shell hardened in 4 seconds. The stick was placed to within 3 degrees of center, and the cream inside was warm milk just half an hour ago.